To the world outside, I coordinate federal responses to biological threats. To my family, I'm the daughter who never amounted to anything, the one who wasted her potential, working some vague government clerical job that doesn't even have a real title. That's what my mother tells people, anyway. She's been saying it for 7 years. I stopped correcting her after the third. My name is Sloan. Wait, no. My name is Vera. And for the past 9 years, I have been a federal health security analyst embedded with the CDC's Emergency Operations Unit. I have been in rooms where the wrong decision kills thousands of people. I have held briefings at 3 in the morning for cabinet officials who look like they hadn't slept in 4 days, because they hadn't. I have coordinated quarantine logistics for outbreaks that never made the news, specifically because I helped make sure they stayed that way. But last Thanksgiving, I sat at my mother's dining room table in a cardigan she picked out for me, while my brother-in-law explained to our extended family that I sort of works in public health, like data entry or something, and nobody corrected him, including me. I should back up. My sister Renee got married 4 years ago to a man named Philip, whose family owns 3 regional hospital networks across the Southeast. The kind of family that has a foundation with their last name on it. The kind of family where the children summer as a verb. Philip is actually fine, a little oblivious. Not mean, just raised in a way where certain assumptions became invisible to him. He genuinely didn't know he was being dismissive. That almost made it worse. Renee, though. Renee knew exactly what she was doing. Growing up, Renee was the obvious one. Valedictorian, full ride to Vanderbilt Law School after that. My parents put her accomplishments on the refrigerator, framed her acceptance letters, drove 6 hours to watch her moot court competition. I'm not bitter about that. Renee worked hard and it showed. What I am is honest. There was never quite enough attention left over for the second kid, and I learned early to be self-sufficient about it. When I was accepted into a federal training program at 23, I couldn't tell anyone what it was for. That's not an exaggeration. The nature of the work, coordinating with intelligence units, managing classified outbreak data, interfacing with agencies I'm not permitted to name in casual conversation, meant that even my job title was a sanitized version of the real thing. I told my family I worked in federal public health coordination. My mother heard government paperwork and filed it away as a mild disappointment. For a few years, I tried explaining. Not the classified parts, obviously, but the shape of it. I work on emergency preparedness, I'd say. Health security. My mother would nod the way people nod when they're waiting for you to finish. My father, who spent 30 years as a commercial contractor, understood work in terms he could drive past and point to. Buildings. Infrastructure. He was proud of Renee because he could tell people she was a lawyer and they knew what that meant. I didn't have that, so at some point I stopped trying and started just letting the assumptions sit there. The Thanksgiving I'm talking about this past November was at my parents' house in Knoxville. My mother had been planning it for 2 months. Renee and Philip were flying in from Atlanta with their 2 kids. Philip's mother, a woman named Constance, was joining for the first time. My mother had called me 4 times to discuss the menu, which was more calls than she'd made to me in the preceding 2 months combined. "You'll be here by noon," she said on the last call. "I'll try, Mom. I have a Vera." The way she said my name meant, don't. I'll be there by noon. I drove up the Wednesday night before. My old bedroom had been converted into what my mother called a sitting room, which meant there was a love seat where my bed used to be, and the closet was full of decorative bins. I slept on the pullout in the basement, and I did not say anything about it because that was not the battle I had chosen. Thanksgiving morning, my mother put me to work on the green beans, which I was grateful for because it meant I had something to do with my hands. Renee and Philip arrived at 11:30 with the kids and all the noise that comes with them, and for a while it was fine. The kids ran around, my father watched the parade, Constance complimented the house in the specific way that means the decorator did good work. Then we sat down for dinner. There were 12 of us at the table. My aunt and uncle from Charlotte, my father's college friend and his wife Constance, and a couple Renee and Philip knew from their neighborhood who had apparently nowhere else to go for the holiday. I was seated at the end, closest to the kitchen, which I had helped stock, between my aunt and an empty chair that got pushed aside when we ran out of space. We went around the table doing what you do. What do you do? Where do you live? What are you grateful for? It was Renee's neighbor who asked me first. And what do you do, Vera? Before I could answer, my mother said, from across the table, she works for the government. Something with health. Data management, Renee added, not unkindly. Just automatically, like she was filling in a form she'd filled in before. Philip looked up. Oh, right, like, what is it? She enters stuff into a system? I watched Constance's expression do a very small, polite thing. Something like that, I said. I always thought you were smart enough for medicine, my aunt said to me in the voice of a compliment shaped like a critique. Did you ever consider going back to school? She's 31, my mother said, and somehow that was the response. I picked up my fork. My father was cutting his turkey. Renee was wiping something off her son's sleeve. Nobody was looking at me, and I had the particular experience of being simultaneously present at a table and entirely alone at it. Data management, Philip said again to himself, and then laughed a little. Not cruelly, just the way people laugh when something is smaller than they expected. Good, honest work. I thought about the briefing I'd given 6 weeks earlier to a joint task force convened by 3 federal agencies about a containment failure in a research facility. I thought about the 48 hours I had gone without sleep, coordinating laboratory testing protocol for a pathogen that, if mismanaged, had the modeled potential to cause a regional health emergency. I thought about the commendation letter currently sitting in a drawer at my apartment because there was nowhere appropriate to put it. I put a piece of turkey in my mouth and chewed it. That was when my phone buzzed. I had it on silent, face down beside my plate. My mother had asked me not to have it at the table, and I'd complied, but I could still feel the vibration. I glanced at it without picking it up. The screen lit briefly. The name on it made something in my chest go very still. I excused myself to the kitchen under the pretext of checking the rolls. The kitchen was empty. I stood beside the oven and called back. The woman who answered ran an office I had worked with closely for 3 years. She was not a panicked person. She was the most level-headed person I had ever professionally encountered, which is why the speed at which she was speaking told me everything I needed to know before I understood a single word. There was a situation. A containment protocol had flagged. She needed me on a call in 40 minutes with 2 agency directors and a liaison from the Department of Health and Human Services. I'm in Knoxville, I said. I know. Do you have a laptop? In my car. Get it. We need you on this, Vera. You built the response matrix for this scenario. Nobody else in the unit has your read on it. I stood in my mother's kitchen for a moment, listening to the sound of laughter from the dining room. My father telling a story. Philip's voice, easy and confident. The kids. I'll be on in 40, I said. I went back to the dining room. Everything okay? My mother asked, and her voice had a particular quality, the one that meant, please don't make this complicated. I have to step out for a call, I said. A work call, it's urgent. My mother's face did the thing it does. Vera, it's Thanksgiving. I know. It's a holiday, she said, as though I might have missed this. Renee was watching me with the particular expression of someone who has been waiting for something to go wrong and now sees it beginning. Can't it wait? She asked. Who calls on Thanksgiving? I'm sorry, I said. I'll be back as soon as I can. I got my laptop from the car. I set up in the basement, in the room where I'd slept the night before, and I spent the next 3 hours on a call that I cannot describe in detail, except to say that the decisions made in that room, a video room, most of us in our homes, one director in an actual office because he'd never left, were the kind that don't make the news. That is the best case outcome of the work I do. You succeed and the story doesn't exist. When I came back upstairs, dinner was over. The dishes were done. My mother was in the living room with Constance, talking in the low, careful way that means the conversation is about something delicate. My father looked up at me from his chair. It all handled? He asked. Yes, I said. He nodded once and looked back at the television. Renee was in the kitchen. She was wrapping leftovers in aluminum foil with the precise, slightly aggressive efficiency she applies to everything. "Mom's upset," she said without looking at me. "I know. You couldn't have waited an hour till after dessert?" "No," I said. "I couldn't." She pressed the edge of the foil down. "What is so important about your data entry job that you have to disappear on Thanksgiving?" I didn't answer. Not because I didn't have one, but because the answer was not mine to give, and I had spent 9 years making peace with that. "Mom thinks you do it on purpose," Renee said, "to avoid us." I know what Mom thinks. And it's not true. Renee put down the foil and turned to look at me. She's 4 years older, 4 inches shorter, with our father's jaw and our mother's eyes. She looked at me for a long moment with an expression I'd seen before and never quite been able to name. "You could at least explain yourself," she said. "You could give her something." "I can't, Renee." "You mean you won't?" I looked at her. "I mean I can't." She picked the foil back up, and I let myself out the back door and stood on my parents' porch in the November cold and breathed. The following week, I got a call from my unit director. Not about the Thanksgiving situation. That was resolved. That was done. This was about something else. A congressional oversight briefing scheduled for mid-December. 3 agencies presenting to a Senate subcommittee on federal emergency preparedness. My director wanted me in the room. Supporting role, secondary position, but present. I said yes. It was the kind of thing you don't say no to. What I didn't know, what nobody in my unit anticipated, was that the briefing would be expanded 2 weeks out to include the Secretary of Health and Human Services, who had requested a direct presentation on response matrix protocol. My work, specifically a methodology I'd spent 4 years building. My director called to tell me. I was driving back from the grocery store. I pulled into a parking lot. "She wants you to present it," my director said. "Not me. You. She's read the documentation and she has questions that I am not equipped to answer without you in the room." I was quiet for a moment. "Okay," I said. "Okay," he said. "Also, there's a reception after. Annual thing, interagency, spouses and family can be invited if you want. Completely optional." He mentioned it the way you mention something you know will go nowhere. He knew my situation, in the vague way colleagues learn the shape of things without the details. I told him I'd think about it. I didn't think I would invite anyone. And then I thought about Thanksgiving. I thought about data entry. I thought about my mother's expression when I said I had to take a call. Like I was a teenager faking sick to get out of a chore. I thought about my sister asking why I couldn't just explain myself. I called my mother. "There's a reception," I said. "For work. It's in Washington. I know it's soon. It's December 17th. I'd like you and Dad to come. And Renee, if she wants." There was a pause. "A work reception," my mother said carefully. "Yes. For the data department. For the agencies I work with. It's interagency. It's at a federal building." Another pause. "Will there be other families there?" "Yes." "Okay," she said slowly, like she was giving me something she wasn't sure I deserved. "We can come." I did not tell her what the reception was for. I did not tell her what was presenting. I said it was a nice thing, a year-end thing, that I thought they might enjoy it. All of that was true. What I left out was that the presenting portion, my portion, was open to guests. They arrived in Washington the morning of the 17th. I met them at the hotel, where I'd booked 2 rooms. My treat, and my mother hugged me the way she does when she is both glad to see me and keeping a small ledger of grievances. My father shook my hand and told me I looked tired, which is his version of saying he noticed something. Renee had come without Philip, who had a firm commitment, but she was there, in a green dress, professional, a little stiff. She hugged me with the middle of her body while her shoulders stayed back. Our version of warmth. "This is very last minute," my mother said in the car. "I know. I'm sorry. Things move fast at my job. What exactly are we going to tonight?" "A reception. Food, people, agency directors. It'll be fine." She looked at me in the way that means she knows there is a thing she doesn't know. The federal building where the briefing and reception were held was the kind of building that makes a statement without trying to. Dark wood, security badges, the specific quality of silence that comes from thick walls and serious purpose. My family signed in at the front desk with ID, received visitor badges, were walked through security by a man who was extremely polite and extremely alert. My mother looked around at the lobby. "This is," she said, and then didn't finish. "Come on," I said. I walked them to a waiting area outside the briefing room and told them the reception would begin in about an hour. They had coffee, and my father found a chair. Renee stood beside a window looking out at the street. "So what happens during the hour?" my mother asked. "There's a briefing first, internal, then the reception." "Are you going to the briefing?" "I'm in the briefing," I said. Her eyebrows moved. "For what?" "I'll explain after." "I have to go in." I went in. I'm not going to describe the presentation in any detail because some of it remains internally sensitive, and also because the mechanics of federal emergency response protocol are genuinely not interesting to most people, which is its own kind of irony given how much rests on them. What I will say is that I stood at the front of a room with 15 people in it, including 2 agency directors and the secretary, and I spoke for 40 minutes about a methodology I had built, answered questions I knew the answers to, and when it was done, the secretary nodded once and said, "This is exactly what we needed. Thank you, Vera." She used my first name because we had met 3 times before. The reception was in the adjoining hall. I came out to find my family exactly where I'd left them, except my father had moved his chair closer to the window and Renee had found a glass of water. My mother stood up when she saw me. "How was it?" she asked. "Good," I said. A colleague of mine came over, a man named Bert who is 6'4" and has the affect of a very calm boulder, and shook my hand and said, "Outstanding presentation. The matrix framing really landed." He nodded at my family and moved on. My mother watched him go. Then the room began to fill with people and my family stood slightly apart, the way you stand when you are somewhere that belongs to someone else, but you're trying to be polite about it. I introduced them around. My director shook my father's hand and said, "Your daughter is one of the best analytical minds I've worked with in 20 years. My father said, "Thank you," in the voice he uses when he is recalibrating something. And then the secretary came through the door. She came in the way people at that level move. Not hurried, not showy, just the calm certainty of someone who has been the most important person in many rooms and learned to carry it quietly. She had 2 aides with her and she was already midway through a conversation when she spotted me across the room. She excused herself from the conversation. She walked toward me. My mother was standing 2 feet to my left. The secretary extended her hand to me first. "Vera," she said, "thank you again. What you built genuinely changed how we're going to approach this." "I'm glad it was useful," I said. She looked at my family with the open, genuine expression of someone who is actually interested. "Are these your people?" "My parents," I said, "and my sister." She shook my father's hand, then my mother's, then Renee's. She said something kind about families who support public servants. She asked my mother how long she'd been in Knoxville. My mother answered in a voice I had never quite heard her use, a little careful, a little bright, like she was trying to be precisely the right amount of present. The secretary turned back to me. "We're going to need you on the task force quarterly review in February," she said. "We'll be in touch." "Of course," I said. She moved on. Her aides followed. The room continued its noise around us. Glasses, voices, the particular frequency of people who work in federal buildings being at ease in federal buildings. My mother stood very still. My father looked at me, then at the direction the secretary had gone, then back at me. "Vera," he said. "Yeah." "What?" He stopped, started again. "What is it that you actually do?" I picked up a small plate of something from a passing tray. "Federal Health Security Analysis," I said. "Emergency response. I design the protocols agencies use when something goes wrong at scale. I've been doing it for 9 years. Silence. Renee was looking at me with an expression I had never seen on her face before. It took me a moment to identify it. It was the look of someone doing arithmetic they should have done a long time ago. "The Thanksgiving call," she said. "Yes." That was, yes. My mother made a small sound. It wasn't a word. "You could have told us," she said finally. Not accusatory. "Quieter than that." "Some of it I couldn't," I said. "The parts I could, I tried. For a while." She looked at me. Her eyes were very bright, the way they get when she's working hard not to cry, which she has always considered a personal failing. "I just thought—" "I know what you thought, Mom." She nodded once, quick, and pressed her lips together. My father put his hand on my shoulder, just for a moment, just briefly, and then let go and looked out at the room. Renee didn't say anything for a long time. Later, when my parents were saying goodbye in the lobby and my father was helping my mother with her coat, Renee came to stand beside me. "I'm sorry," she said. It was quiet enough that I almost didn't hear it. "For the data entry thing," she added, "and the Thanksgiving thing." I looked at her profile, the jaw, the eyes, the 4-year-older version of some family resemblance we both carry. "I know," I said. "You let us think that for so long." "Yes." She was quiet for a moment. "Why?" "I thought about it honestly, because at some point I needed you to see me without knowing. And then when you didn't, I stopped. I think I got tired of trying to make it legible." Renee was quiet for a long time. Her glass of water was still in her hand, mostly untouched. "She asked me," she said finally, "the secretary, when you went to get your bag. She said, 'You must be proud of your sister.'" I didn't say anything. I said yes. Renee looked at me. "I said yes, and I meant it, and I want you to know I meant it." I nodded. I walked my family to the lobby doors. My father hugged me before he went through them. Not the shoulder clap kind. A real one. Held for a beat longer than usual. My mother cupped my face in both her hands the way she used to when I was very small, and then let go and went through the door without looking back, because that's how she handles things she can't quite say out loud. I stood in the lobby of the building for a moment after they were gone. Then I went back upstairs to collect my laptop, said goodnight to my colleagues, thanked the secretary's aide for coordinating, and walked out into the December air. I had a 7-hour drive back to Knoxville to return something I'd borrowed from my parents' kitchen. I did not rush.